Are there any similarities between Stoicism and Nihilism? How are these two philosophies different? Would it be possible to be a Stoic nihilist? While Stoicism has been receiving a lot of increased attention recently, the mindset associated with nihilism is no stranger to our society. Stoicism. Founded in the early 3rd century BC in Athens, Stoicism is an ancient philosophy that has been experiencing a modern renaissance in recent years. This school of thought proposes that the individual can flourish through the practice of virtue. One can achieve eudaimonia, happiness, by living in accordance with nature and adhering to the Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. All things are parts of one single system, which is called nature. The individual life is good when it is in harmony with nature. Zeno of Citium. The Stoics suggested that virtue is the only good and vice is the only evil. Everything else is indifferent, though these indifferents can be divided into preferred and dispreferred. Here are some of the core concepts of Stoicism. Individuals are deeply connected to other humans and the processes within the universe. A smooth flow of life can be achieved by living in harmony with nature. We must learn to embrace and love our fate. Virtue is both necessary and sufficient for a good life. Adversity provides us with opportunities for personal growth. Individuals need to distinguish between what is within their control and what is outside their control to focus on what they can influence. Death is not evil, but the fear of death must be overcome. The reality of our mortality should never be far from our minds. External events are beyond our control. We only have control over our internal processes, such as our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. The universe is in a constant state of change. We must learn to accept and embrace impermanence. We have the resources we need within ourselves if we are willing to seek them. The present moment is all we have. Our lives are in the present. What is nihilism? For a deep analysis on Nietzsche and nihilism, you can see the link at the top right. Nihilism is a philosophical belief that life lacks inherent meaning, value, or purpose. That is, other than the meaning or value we create ourselves. Nihilism. Any aim is lacking. Any answer to the question, why, is lacking. What does nihilism mean? That the supreme values devaluate themselves. Friedrich Nietzsche. It isn't uncommon to hear someone or something described as nihilistic these days. This is typically used to imply the concept that everything is meaningless. While there is some truth to this statement, it's worth noting that this is something of an oversimplification of nihilism as a philosophy. Many thinkers after Nietzsche have delved deeper into the theme of nihilism. Consequently, numerous branches have emerged. Some have categorized nihilism as having 5 primary forms. 1. Existential nihilism. 2. Cosmic nihilism. 3. Epistemological nihilism. 4. Political nihilism. 5. Ethical nihilisms. 6. Optimistic nihilism. Existential nihilism. Existential nihilists hold the belief that human life is inherently without purpose and significance. In essence, this philosophical stance asserts that life has no intrinsic meaning or value. According to this philosophy, it's up to individuals to harness their freedom of choice to create meaning in their own lives. As you might guess, existential nihilism is often linked with impulsive behavior, destructive attitudes and actions, and even thoughts of suicide. It's crucial to note that existential nihilism and existentialism are distinct branches of philosophy, though they do share some common ground. Cosmic nihilism. Cosmic nihilism is one of the most frequently discussed forms of nihilism. Rather than simply stating that life has no intrinsic meaning, it posits that nature is indifferent to human concerns, or may even be completely unintelligible. It suggests that the universe is only knowable to the extent that we can explain and describe things scientifically. Essentially, this philosophy argues that the cosmos offers no support or aid to human lives, values, or aims. In fact, some believe the universe is actively hostile to human goals, drives, and values. Cosmic nihilists sometimes suggest that any meaning humans create is merely a coping mechanism to deal with our inevitable deaths. That's right, everything from family, joy, love, and freedom is just a way to cope. Grim stuff. Epistemological nihilism. Epistemology, the philosophical branch focused on the theory of knowledge, leads us to epistemological nihilism. The belief that knowledge itself doesn't exist. According to this theory, even if knowledge did exist, humans would be unable to obtain it. Therefore, the existence of knowledge is redundant and useless. Due to this extreme viewpoint, epistemological nihilism is often associated with extreme skepticism. Political nihilism. Political nihilism emphasizes the corruption and irreformability of current institutions. Political, social, and religious. From this perspective, the only way to improve the future is by destroying these systems entirely. Ethical nihilism. Ethical nihilism, also known as moral nihilism, contends that objective notions of right and wrong do not exist. Optimistic nihilism. Life may have no inherent meaning, but unlike existential nihilists who see no way out, optimistic nihilists believe they can give life their own meaning and find their own path without succumbing to despair. They are fully aware that life has no intrinsic meaning, that there is no God, and that society is just a human construct. In the link at the top right, you will find a video entirely dedicated to active nihilism. There are three main takes within this philosophy. 1. Amoralism. This view completely rejects moral principles. Adherents strive to live a life free of morality. Since God is dead, good and evil no longer exist. 2. Moral subjectivism. Morality exists, but is completely subjective, arbitrary, and individual. Morality is determined by personal feelings, opinions, and tastes, as it is decided by the individual. There is no such thing as objective right or wrong, and rational criticism or justification isn't required for moral judgments. 3. Egoism. Individuals are only obligated to their own selves. If a behavior doesn't negatively impact their own personal, private interests, they shouldn't experience any moral concern about it. Stoicism versus nihilism, the similarities. Now that we've taken a closer look at both Stoicism and nihilism, you've probably noticed that these are pretty different philosophies. Though these schools of thought are contrasting, they do have a few things in common. Exploring the nature of life and meaning. One of the primary similarities between Stoicism and nihilism is that they both take a closer look at the nature of life and the notion of meaning. Man's ideal state is realized when he has fulfilled the purpose for which he is born. And what is it that reason demands of him? Something very easy, that he live in accordance with his own nature. Seneca the Younger. Of course, what they find when they look at these concepts is quite different. Stoics seek to align with the rationality of the universe in order to lead a meaningful life. Emphasizing the cultivation of inner tranquility and virtue, Stoics find meaning and purpose in life through virtuous living and personal growth. Nihilists believe that life is inherently meaningless. The philosophy challenges individuals to question traditional beliefs and experience freedom from these traditional beliefs. Though the understanding of the nature of life and meaning is quite different in these two philosophies, the point stands that they are similar in their exploration of the topics, encouraging individuals to examine their beliefs about existence. Another thing that these two philosophies have in common is that they both ask the individual to examine their own interpretation of life and existence. I cannot comprehend how any man can want anything but the truth. Marcus Aurelius. Both Stoicism and Nihilism encourage people to critically examine their beliefs about existence and engage in introspection. Separation from external influences. Both Stoicism and Nihilism advocate for detachment from external events, albeit in different ways. Stoics recognize that external influences are beyond their control and focus instead on internal events they can control. Nihilists encourage people to develop a more autonomous and critical worldview by detaching from traditional societal expectations and belief systems, mindfulness, and self-reflection. In both philosophies, individuals are urged to scrutinize and question their own beliefs. Mindfulness and self-reflection are tools through which people can become aware of their own beliefs in both Stoicism and Nihilism. Questioning assumptions. Both Stoicism and Nihilism prompt individuals to question their preconceived notions about life. Nihilists challenge prevailing beliefs about objective values and inherent meaning, while Stoics encourage self-examination to ensure that one's beliefs and actions align with nature. Encouraging freedom of thought. Both schools of thought advocate for thinking freely without being constrained by popular opinion or societal norms, touching upon the concept of personal responsibility. Finally, both Stoicism and Nihilism touch upon the concept of personal responsibility. That being said, they don't reach the same conclusions and don't utilize the same underlying assumptions in order to reach those conclusions. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Epictetus. Stoicism, on the one hand, stresses that each individual can control their own thoughts, beliefs, and actions. By being self-aware and exerting control over internal events, Stoics can aim to live virtuously and reach a state of inner peace. If you want something good, get it from yourself. Epictetus. Nihilism, on the other hand, argues that individuals should take responsibility for creating meaning in their own lives, since there is no inherent objective meaning to life. Stoicism versus Nihilism. The difference. Stoicism and Nihilism are philosophies that ask some of the same questions, but come to very different answers. Let's take a look at the stark contrast between these schools of thought in terms of their proposed philosophical framework. The nature of reality. The central idea that guides the philosophy of Stoicism is that living in accordance with nature leads to a good flow of life. Virtue is the only good, and living virtuously is necessary and sufficient to live a good life. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. Marcus Aurelius. In Stoicism, the universe is governed by a rational, purposeful, and ordered principle. Fate exists, and we are all a part of it. We can either flow with fate or we can fight against it. We can't control external events, but we do have control over internal experiences. Submit to the fate of your own free will. Marcus Aurelius. Nihilism doesn't share the view of the Stoics that the universe is rational and ordered. They completely reject the idea that there is any purpose or meaning inherently built into the structure of the universe. Meaning and purpose in life. The Stoics put forward the idea that humans can lead meaningful lives by living in harmony with the rational and ordered nature of the universe. By focusing on the pursuit of virtue and personal growth, individuals are able to lead truly meaningful lives. A man's true greatness lies in the consciousness of an honest purpose in life, founded on a just estimate of himself and everything else, on frequent self-examinations, and a steady obedience to the rule which he knows to be right, without troubling himself about what others may think or say, or whether they do or do not that which he thinks and says and does. Marcus Aurelius. In sharp contrast, nihilism posits that there is no inherent meaning to life. Individuals can either accept the fundamental meaninglessness of life, or they can use their freedom of choice to create their own subjective meaning. As you might imagine, the nihilistic view can lead to some pretty rough outcomes from a worldview standpoint. Though you don't have to be a nihilist to experience existential dread. For example, it is often linked to nihilism because it occurs as a consequence of asking questions about the meaning, or lack thereof, of life. Ethics and morality. Living a virtuous life is one of the most central teachings of Stoicism. The four virtues of Stoicism are wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. It is the Stoic belief that virtue is the only good, and vice is the only bad. Everything else is indifferent. Essentially, tools that can be used either virtuously or viciously. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly, and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature. Marcus Aurelius. If you want to live a good life, according to the Stoics, aiming to be virtuous even in the smallest endeavors is essential. To the nihilists, there are no objective virtues, values, or moral truths. There can be some differences in what this really means, depending on the type of nihilism a person practices. In some instances, it can lead to the proposal of individualistic or subjective moral frameworks. In others, it could mean completely rejecting the traditional sense of morality as we understand it. Can a person be a Stoic nihilist? While there are some general similarities between Stoicism and nihilism, these philosophies are relatively contradictory. However, a person could theoretically pick and choose elements from each philosophy in order to create a somewhat cohesive worldview. For example, a nihilist would have to drop the greater sense of order in the universe proposed by the Stoics. They could potentially view life as inherently meaningless while still using some of the practices of Stoicism in their daily life. For example, they might practice focus on personal development and growth, building emotional resilience, acceptance of death, exerting control over one's thoughts, beliefs, and actions, accepting a lack of control over external events. If a person were to focus only on the personal development aspects of Stoicism and stay away from cosmology, it is conceivably possible to be a Stoic nihilist. At the same time, they would most likely run into some complex and difficult-to-solve questions along the way if they were to continuously engage with both Stoic and Nihilist texts. What's the difference between Stoicism and existential nihilism? Existential nihilism is one of the more pervasive forms of nihilism in the modern era. This philosophy posits that life and the universe lack any inherent purpose or meaning. Human existence is not the result of any grand design, and the only way to find any meaning in life is subjectively through our own personal interpretations. Here are some of the predominant differences between Stoicism and existential nihilism. Meaning and purpose. Stoicism suggests that life has meaning, in stark contrast to existential nihilism. Stoics argue that individuals can find purpose by living virtuously and cultivating wisdom and inner tranquility. Existential nihilists posit that there's no objective meaning or inherent value in life. Morality and ethics. For Stoics, virtue is the only good, while external goods cannot bring sustainable happiness or contentment. Existential nihilists believe that morals are human constructs and entirely subjective. There are no objective universal virtues or truths. Relationship to emotions. Stoics believe that practicing rationality, understanding our lack of control over external circumstances, and recognizing impermanence allows individuals to achieve tranquility even in the face of obstacles. Existential nihilists do not have an overarching theory on how to relate to one's emotions in the same structured manner as the Stoics. Who are some famous Stoics? Who are the individuals that we have to thank for Stoicism as a philosophy? Let's look at some of the main characters. Zeno of Citium. Anyone who has found any value in the teachings of Stoicism can look back more than 2,000 years to send some gratitude towards Zeno of Citium. Well-being is realized by small steps, but is truly no small thing. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. Way back around 300 BC, he taught people about the potential to gain peace of mind and goodness when living a virtuous life in accordance with nature. Seneca the Younger, Lucius Annaeus. Seneca the Younger, often referred to simply as Seneca, was an ancient Roman philosopher as well as a dramatist and statesman. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca the Younger, leading a fascinating and controversial life that involved tutoring the infamous Nero, advising Nero, and being forced to kill himself after being, potentially falsely, accused of conspiring to assassinate Nero. His beautifully written letters, dealing with moral issues, are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Consider starting with letters from a Stoic if you want to get into Seneca. Epictetus, born a slave in present-day Turkey. Epictetus is a great guy to turn to if you're interested in the practical application of Stoicism to your life. Beyond that, he's a tremendous example of managing to find tranquility in one's life. Despite adversity and external occurrences, one has no control over. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Epictetus. Allowed by his master to study Stoicism under Musonius Rufus, Epictetus eventually gained his freedom and taught philosophy. Thanks to his pupil Arrian, we still have access to his teachings to this day. Marcus Aurelius. Does this impressive character really even need any introduction? The great Marcus Aurelius was the last Roman emperor of the Pax Romana, an age of relative calm, stability, and peace in the empire. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. He wrote regularly in a journal, which we are lucky to still have access to in the modern day. Published as meditations, This is a classic Stoic text that can be read over and over again. Musonius Rufus. Though he has less name recognition than Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, don't skip over Musonius Rufus when studying Stoicism. If we were to measure what is good by how much pleasure it brings, nothing would be better than self-control. If we were to measure what is to be avoided by its pain, nothing would be more painful than lack of self-control. Musonius Rufus. The teacher of Epictetus, we still have access to some extracts from his lectures. Who are some famous nihilists? There are a number of famous writers, artists, and thinkers that have been associated with nihilism in the last 2 centuries. Let's take a look at some of the most notable figures that were influenced by or associated with this philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche. If you've ever looked into nihilism as a philosophy, you probably already know a bit about Nietzsche. Often cited as the most influential nihilist philosopher, the truth is that his views on nihilism were quite complex. It's, therefore, difficult to sum them up here in a few sentences. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Friedrich Nietzsche. In short, though, it's worth noting that even though he proclaimed that God is dead, and believed that the terrifying and freeing consequences of this led to a state of nihilism, he also saw this as a path to a new way of being. He argued that one must work through this stage in order to develop a meaningful worldview. Jean-Paul Sartre. Technically an existential philosopher, Sartre argued that the world is absurd, and each individual is responsible for creating their own worldview. What is life but an unpleasant interruption to a peaceful non-existence? Jean-Paul Sartre. He is also known for questioning traditional moral values and ideas of meaning. Fyodor Dostoevsky. A Russian novelist and philosopher, themes of nihilism can be found in Dostoevsky's work. In his Crime and Punishment, you can find a powerful exploration of the consequences of being guided by nihilistic ideas. If God does not exist, everything is permitted. Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers Karamazov. I say, let the world go to hell, but I should always have my tea. Fyodor Dostoevsky, Notes from Underground. Albert Camus. Another existentialist, and not strictly a nihilist, Camus was a French philosopher and writer that often explored the notion of absurdity. Life is meaningless, but worth living, provided you recognize it's meaningless. Albert Camus. Even though he isn't technically a nihilist, he makes our list because he addressed the difficulty of finding meaning in a universe that seems to be completely indifferent to us. Are you a Stoic or a nihilist? Comparing and contrasting different philosophical schools can be a useful way to gain a deeper understanding of your own beliefs and the universe as a whole. Regardless of whether you subscribe to either of these schools of thought, exploring the different ways individuals have tried to make sense of our lives on Earth is truly fascinating. Stoicism and nihilism are fundamentally different philosophies. Stoics believe in a rational, ordered universe and advocate for adherence to 4 core virtues. In contrast, nihilists see life and the universe as meaningless and reject the notion of objective morality. However, both philosophies share a common ground in encouraging individuals to think critically about their lives, their beliefs, and the world they live in. Even if you don't find the conclusions of each philosophy compelling, there's undeniable merit in the call for people to take responsibility for their own worldview.